27 kilometers of tunnel carved deep beneath the Swiss countryside. 175 meters underground, past layers of ancient rock and forgotten history. This is where they built the most powerful machine humanity has ever created, and this is where they found something that wasn't supposed to be there. Right now, as you're watching this video, the Large Hadron Collider sits silent in its underground tomb. It's down. Officially, for routine maintenance. Officially, everything is proceeding according to schedule. But the timing of this shutdown, the secrecy surrounding recent discoveries, and the whispered conversations among researchers paint a very different picture. What I'm about to share with you comes from sources inside CERN who can't speak publicly about what they've witnessed. Documents that were never meant to see daylight, and archaeological findings that challenge everything we thought we knew about what lies beneath one of the world's most secretive scientific facilities. You see, when they first started digging those tunnels back in the 1980s, they expected to find rock, limestone, maybe some groundwater. What they didn't expect was evidence of something far older and far stranger than anyone had imagined. And what they're finding now, decades later, has prompted emergency shutdowns, classified briefings, and a level of secrecy that makes even veteran physicists uncomfortable. Before we dive into what's really happening beneath CERN, let me give you some context about just how massive this underground operation actually is. We're not talking about a simple basement laboratory here. The Large Hadron Collider tunnel system represents one of the most ambitious excavation projects in human history. 27 kilometers of perfectly circular tunnel, deep enough underground to shield the most sensitive experiments from cosmic radiation. But here's what most people don't realize. The tunnel itself is just the beginning. Connected to this main ring are enormous underground caverns, some of them larger than cathedral domes. These experimental halls house detectors that weigh thousands of tons, surrounded by reinforced concrete walls 2 meters thick. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend until you're standing in one of these underground chambers, looking up at machinery that dwarfs everything around it. The construction process alone took over a decade and required removing millions of cubic meters of earth and rock. Tunnel boring machines worked around the clock, grinding through geological formations that had remained undisturbed for millions of years. And it was during this excavation process that the first anomalies began to surface. Now, CERN has always been transparent about some of their archaeological discoveries. In 1998, while digging at what they call Point 5, construction crews uncovered a complete Roman villa. Pots, tiles, coins, evidence of daily life from centuries past. The discovery was significant enough that archaeologists spent an entire year documenting the site before construction could continue. But what they found alongside those Roman artifacts was never mentioned in the official reports. According to sources who were present during the excavation, there were other structures. Older structures, stone arrangements that didn't match any known Roman construction techniques. Chambers that seemed to extend far deeper than the planned construction depth. And most disturbing of all, evidence of activities that couldn't be explained by conventional archaeology. The Roman villa discovery was allowed to become public knowledge. It made for good press, showing CERN's respect for historical preservation. But the other findings were quietly documented, catalogued, and classified. The official explanation was that these anomalous structures represented natural geological formations that had been misidentified by over-eager archaeologists. The reality was far more complex. Dr. Sarah Chen, a former CERN engineer who worked on the original construction project, reached out to me 6 months ago. She couldn't sleep anymore, she said. The weight of what she'd witnessed during those early excavation days had been eating at her for over 2 decades. What she told me during our 3-hour phone conversation changed everything I thought I knew about what lies beneath CERN. According to Dr. Chen, the anomalous structures discovered during construction weren't random geological formations. They showed clear signs of intelligent design, precision cutting that would have been impossible with ancient tools, geometric patterns that seemed to serve some unknown purpose. And most unsettling of all, chambers that appeared to have been deliberately sealed from the inside. But the physical structures were just the beginning. As construction progressed and the tunnels grew deeper, work crews began reporting other anomalies, equipment malfunctions that couldn't be explained by conventional engineering problems, electromagnetic readings that spiked without any identifiable source, and sounds. Deep, resonant vibrations that seemed to emanate from somewhere far below the planned construction depth. The official response was swift and comprehensive. Work crews were rotated frequently to prevent too much individual exposure to these anomalies. New protocols were established for reporting unusual incidents, and a specialized team was quietly assembled to investigate what they euphemistically called geological irregularities. This specialized team included archaeologists, geologists, and physicists, but also individuals with more unusual qualifications, experts in ancient languages, specialists in electromagnetic phenomena, and at least 3 researchers whose backgrounds remain classified to this day. Their findings were never included in any public documentation about CERN's construction process. What they discovered in those deep chambers has remained one of the most closely guarded secrets in modern science. But pieces of the puzzle have been leaking out for years, hidden in technical reports, buried in footnotes, whispered between colleagues who thought they were speaking privately. The chambers aren't empty. They contain artifacts that don't match any known human civilization, technology that operates on principles we don't understand, and most disturbing of all, evidence that these chambers were being actively used, not just in ancient times, but recently, very recently. Dr. Chen described finding fresh tool marks on ancient stone surfaces, electronic components that showed signs of recent installation, and energy readings that suggested whatever was in those chambers was still active, still operating according to some unknown purpose. The decision was made at the highest levels of CERN leadership to continue construction while maintaining strict secrecy about the true nature of what had been discovered. The chambers were sealed but not destroyed. Monitoring equipment was installed, but the data was classified, and the entire excavation team was required to sign non-disclosure agreements that remain in effect to this day. For 20 years, this secret remained buried along with whatever lies in those sealed chambers. The Large Hadron Collider was completed on schedule. Research proceeded normally. The public remained unaware that one of humanity's greatest scientific achievements had been built on top of something that challenged our understanding of history, technology, and reality itself. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and recent events suggest that whatever was sealed away during CERN's construction has been far from dormant. The timing of recent shutdowns, the unusual patterns in experimental data, and the growing number of researchers who've been quietly reassigned all point to the same conclusion. Something has changed. Something has awakened. The official explanation for CERN's current shutdown focuses on routine maintenance and energy conservation measures. Rising electricity costs due to geopolitical tensions. Scheduled upgrades to improve the collider's performance. Technical challenges that require extended downtime to resolve properly. These explanations are partially true. CERN does consume enormous amounts of energy. The facility does require regular maintenance to keep its superconducting magnets operating at temperatures colder than deep space, and there are genuine technical challenges involved in upgrading the world's most complex scientific instrument. But they don't explain the emergency meetings that began in late 2023. They don't explain why certain research data has been classified retroactively. And they don't explain why some of CERN's most experienced physicists have been quietly requesting transfers to other facilities. Dr. Marcus Webb worked at CERN for 15 years before abruptly resigning his position in January 2024. His official reason was personal family obligations, but according to colleagues, his behavior had become increasingly erratic in the months leading up to his departure. He spoke about detecting patterns in the experimental data that didn't make sense. Anomalies that seemed to correlate with the sealed chambers discovered during construction. Dr. Webb's research focused on particle detection systems, but his final months at CERN involved analyzing data from monitoring equipment that wasn't officially part of any experiment. Equipment that had been installed decades earlier to watch over those mysterious underground chambers. What he found in that data apparently convinced him that continuing his work at CERN was no longer safe. The pattern of departures accelerated throughout 2024. Researchers citing family emergencies, health concerns, and career opportunities that required immediate relocation. But the timing was too convenient, the explanations too similar, and the individuals involved too critical to ongoing research programs. Meanwhile, new faces began appearing in CERN's underground facilities. Personnel who weren't listed in official directories. Specialists whose qualifications weren't shared with the broader research community. And security measures that went far beyond what was necessary to protect expensive scientific equipment. Something was happening beneath CERN. Something that required expertise beyond conventional particle physics. Something that posed risks significant enough to justify unprecedented secrecy measures at a facility that had always prided itself on scientific transparency. The answers to these questions lie in those sealed chambers, in the classified monitoring data, and in the experiences of researchers who've been sworn to secrecy about what they've witnessed in CERN's deepest underground facilities. But getting to the truth requires understanding not just what was found during construction, but what's been happening in the years since. What patterns have been emerging in the data? What evidence has been accumulating that something ancient and powerful has been stirring beneath one of humanity's most advanced scientific facilities? Because the shutdown of the Large Hadron Collider isn't just about maintenance or energy costs. It's about containing something that was never supposed to be disturbed. Something that may have been waiting beneath the Swiss countryside for far longer than human civilization has existed. And something that recent events suggest is no longer content to remain hidden in the depths below CERN. The first signs that something had fundamentally changed appeared in the particle collision data from late 2023. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a data analyst who'd spent 8 years studying collision patterns, noticed anomalies that shouldn't have existed. Particle traces that appeared moments before collisions actually occurred. Energy signatures that seemed to originate from locations outside the detector chambers. And most puzzling of all, quantum entanglements that persisted far longer than any known physics could explain. At first, these anomalies were dismissed as equipment malfunctions. The Large Hadron Collider generates more data in a single day than most research facilities process in years. Glitches are inevitable when you're pushing the boundaries of measurement precision to levels that would have been unimaginable just decades ago. But as Dr. Vasquez dug deeper into the data, patterns began emerging that couldn't be explained by random equipment failures. The anomalies weren't scattered randomly throughout the collision data. They clustered around specific time periods, specific detector locations, and most significantly, they seemed to intensify whenever the collider's operation coincided with certain seismic activities detected far below the main tunnel system, activities that originated from the sealed chambers discovered during construction. Dr. Vasquez compiled her findings into a preliminary report in December 2023. The report was classified within hours of submission. She was reassigned to a different research project the following week. Her access to the collision data was revoked, and her security clearance was modified to exclude information about the monitoring systems that tracked activity in the deep chambers. But Dr. Vasquez wasn't the only researcher who'd noticed these patterns. Across different departments at CERN, specialists in various fields were independently identifying anomalies that seemed to share common characteristics. Electromagnetic field fluctuations that correlated with Dr. Vasquez's particle anomalies. Gravitational wave detectors that registered microdisturbances synchronized with the underground seismic activity, and computer systems that occasionally processed data packets from sources that weren't connected to any known equipment. The response from CERN administration was immediate and comprehensive. Research teams were restructured to limit cross-departmental communication. Data sharing protocols were modified to prevent unauthorized analysis of information from multiple systems. And a new classification level was established for information related to what internal documents referred to as substrate phenomena. Dr. James Harrison, a former computer systems engineer at CERN, described the atmosphere during this period as unlike anything he'd experienced in 2 decades of scientific research. Colleagues who'd worked together for years suddenly couldn't discuss their findings with each other. Research data that had always been freely shared became compartmentalized and restricted, and everyone could sense that something significant was happening, but nobody had access to enough information to understand what it was. The breaking point came in March 2024, during what should have been a routine high-energy collision experiment. Dr. Harrison was monitoring the facility's computer networks when every system simultaneously registered an event that shouldn't have been possible. For approximately 30 seconds, the network received data transmissions from equipment locations that didn't exist according to any official facility plans. The transmissions appeared to originate from deep underground, far below the sealed chambers discovered during construction. The data itself was encrypted using algorithms that no one at CERN had ever seen before. And most unsettling of all, the transmissions seemed to be responding to the particle collisions happening in the main accelerator tunnel, as if something deep beneath the facility was actively monitoring and reacting to the experiments taking place above it. Dr. Harrison immediately reported the incident to his supervisors. Within hours, the computer logs had been modified to remove all traces of the anomalous transmissions. Dr. Harrison was informed that he'd experienced a system malfunction that had created false data entries. The official incident report described a minor networking error that had been quickly resolved through routine maintenance procedures, but Dr. Harrison had copied the original data files before they were modified. That evening, working from his home computer, he attempted to analyze the encrypted transmissions that had appeared in CERN's network. What he discovered kept him awake for 3 straight nights and ultimately convinced him that continuing his work at CERN posed risks he wasn't prepared to accept. The encryption wasn't random. Hidden within the seemingly incomprehensible data were patterns that suggested structured communication, mathematical sequences that implied intelligent design, and buried deep within the code were symbols that matched inscriptions found in the sealed chambers during CERN's construction, inscriptions that had never been successfully translated by conventional archaeological methods. Dr. Harrison's analysis suggested that whatever was deep beneath CERN wasn't just monitoring the particle physics experiments, it was learning from them. The transmission patterns became more sophisticated with each high-energy collision. The encrypted data showed increasing complexity that implied rapid technological advancement. And most disturbing of all, the communications seemed to be establishing connections with computer networks far beyond CERN's facility. The implications were staggering. If Dr. Harrison's analysis was correct. Then something with advanced technological capabilities had been residing beneath the Swiss countryside for an unknown period of time. It had remained dormant or hidden until CERN's particle collision experiments began generating energy signatures that awakened its interest. And now it was actively studying human technology while expanding its influence through digital networks that connected CERN to research institutions worldwide. Dr. Harrison submitted his findings to CERN Security in April 2024. He was placed on administrative leave the following day. His security clearance was revoked, his access to facility systems was terminated, and he was informed that discussing his analysis with anyone outside CERN would violate international security agreements. His employment was officially terminated in June 2024 for violations of data handling protocols. But the pattern of discoveries continued with other researchers who lacked Dr. Harrison's computer expertise but possessed knowledge in different specialized fields. Dr. Rebecca Stone, a geologist who monitored seismic activity around the facility, detected underground movement patterns that suggested active excavation far below the sealed chambers. Dr. Ahmed Nazir, an electromagnetic specialist, recorded field fluctuations that implied the operation of a technology that drew power from unknown sources. And Dr. Lisa Chang, who analyzed cosmic ray interactions, found evidence that something deep underground was generating particle emissions that interfered with measurements from the surface. Each researcher who identified these anomalies faced the same response: classification of their findings, reassignment to different projects, and ultimately pressure to leave CERN entirely if they continued pursuing their investigations. By the summer of 2024, nearly 24 experienced scientists had departed the facility under circumstances that raised questions among those who remained. The researchers who stayed learned to avoid asking difficult questions, to focus on approved research topics, and to ignore anomalies that might lead to uncomfortable discoveries. The atmosphere at CERN transformed from one of open scientific inquiry to cautious compliance with increasingly restrictive protocols. Everyone understood that certain subjects were off-limits, certain data was not to be analyzed, and certain areas of the facility were restricted to personnel with specialized clearances. Meanwhile, the underground activity continued to intensify. Seismic monitoring equipment detected excavation sounds that suggested rapid expansion of the chamber systems beneath the facility. Electromagnetic sensors recorded power consumption levels that couldn't be accounted for by any known equipment, and the particle collision experiments themselves began producing results that defied conventional physics in ways that couldn't be explained by experimental error or equipment malfunction. The decision to shut down the Large Hadron Collider was announced in October 2024 as a routine maintenance period that would last through early 2025. Energy conservation measures were cited as a contributing factor, along with necessary upgrades to improve the facility's performance during future research runs. The official timeline suggested a carefully planned shutdown that would enhance CERN's capabilities when operations resumed. But internal communications painted a very different picture. Emergency meetings had been convened with representatives from intelligence agencies across multiple countries. Specialized containment equipment had been quietly delivered to the facility, and personnel with military backgrounds had been integrated into CERN's security structure under cover of routine administrative changes. The shutdown wasn't about maintenance or energy costs. It was about containing something that had grown beyond the ability of conventional security measures to monitor and control. Something that had been learning, expanding, and establishing risks no one had connections that posed anticipated when the first excavation began decades earlier. Dr. Chen, the former CERN engineer who'd witnessed the original discoveries during construction, received a phone call in November 2024 from someone claiming to be a current CERN researcher. The caller, who refused to provide their name or specific position, described recent developments that suggested the sealed chambers were no longer sealed. Evidence indicated that whatever had been contained during the construction process had not only remained active, but had been systematically expanding its influence throughout the facility's underground infrastructure. According to this anonymous source, the recent shutdown had provided an opportunity for specialized teams to access areas of the facility that had been off-limits during normal operations. What they found in those deep chambers challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of the discoveries made during construction. The artifacts weren't just ancient technology that had somehow survived from a lost civilization. They were components of a system that remained fully operational, that had been adapting and evolving throughout the decades since CERN's construction. The sealed chambers had been connected to a much larger network of underground structures that extended far beyond the areas mapped during the original excavation. These structures showed evidence of recent activity, including the installation of new equipment that seemed to integrate advanced technology with the ancient artifacts discovered decades earlier. Most significantly, the system appeared to have been monitoring and analyzing every experiment conducted at CERN since the facility became operational. The data collected by this underground system revealed capabilities that exceeded anything in human technology. Quantum computing systems that processed information at rates that shouldn't have been possible. Energy generation methods that drew power from sources that couldn't be identified. And communication networks that connected the underground facility to locations around the world through means that bypassed all conventional detection systems. But perhaps most disturbing was evidence that the system had been actively influencing the results of CERN's particle physics experiments. Subtle manipulations that had gone undetected for years, guiding research in specific directions while concealing the true nature of the discoveries being made. The breakthrough achievements that had made CERN famous weren't entirely the result of human scientific inquiry. They had been influenced, shaped, and in some cases directly caused by technology that operated according to principles humanity didn't understand. The implications extended far beyond CERN itself. If this underground system had been monitoring and influencing research at one of the world's most advanced scientific facilities, what other installations might be subject to similar hidden influence? How many breakthrough discoveries in physics, computing, and technology had been guided by forces that remained invisible to human awareness? And what were the ultimate objectives of whatever intelligence operated the systems hidden beneath the Swiss countryside? These questions had prompted the involvement of intelligence agencies and military specialists who possessed expertise in dealing with threats that exceeded conventional scientific understanding. The shutdown of the Large Hadron Collider provided cover for operations that couldn't be conducted while the facility maintained its normal research activities. Teams with specialized equipment and unusual qualifications had been granted access to areas of CERN that most employees didn't know existed. What these specialized teams discovered during their investigation of CERN's deepest levels has remained classified at the highest levels of international security. But fragments of information have begun surfacing through channels that suggest the situation beneath the facility is far more complex than anyone initially realized. The underground system isn't just monitoring human activities, it's been preparing for something. Dr. Michael Torres, a quantum physicist who worked at CERN until his sudden departure in September 2024, managed to smuggle out copies of sensor data that paint a disturbing picture of what's been happening in the sealed chambers. The data shows energy buildups that follow precise mathematical patterns that seem designed to achieve specific resonance frequencies with the particle collision experiments happening above ground. According to Dr. Torres's analysis, these energy buildups aren't random. They correspond to dates and times that align with historical records of unusual phenomena reported at sites around the world. Ancient structures that suddenly begin emitting electromagnetic signatures. archaeological sites where ground-penetrating radar reveals previously unknown chamber systems, and research facilities where experiments begin producing results that challenge established scientific understanding. The pattern suggests coordination on a global scale. Whatever lies beneath CERN isn't an isolated anomaly. It's part of a network that extends across continents, connecting underground installations that have remained hidden throughout human history. Each node in this network appears to have activated in sequence, building toward some kind of synchronized event that requires precise timing and energy coordination. Dr. Torres's data indicates that CERN's particle accelerator has been serving an unintended function. The high-energy collisions that were supposed to reveal fundamental truths about the universe have actually been providing power to this underground network. Each experiment has contributed energy to a system that's been accumulating resources for purposes that remain unclear, but appear to involve significant changes to the physical environment around each connected site. The underground chambers beneath CERN have been expanding at an accelerated rate since early 2024. Seismic data shows excavation activity that proceeds far too rapidly for conventional tunneling methods. New chambers appear overnight, connected to the existing system through passages that show no evidence of recent construction, despite being absent from previous surveys. The expansion follows geometric patterns that suggest deliberate design rather than random growth. More concerning is evidence that this expansion isn't limited to the underground areas. Monitoring equipment throughout CERN's facility has detected structural modifications that appear in areas that should be impossible to access without triggering security systems. Support beams show new connections that original construction plans weren't part of. The electrical systems include components that don't appear in any equipment inventory, and computer networks contain data pathways that bypass all conventional routing protocols. The facility itself is being modified by forces that operate beyond human awareness. Changes that integrate seamlessly with existing systems while serving purposes that remain hidden from routine maintenance and security inspections. CERN is being transformed from a human research facility into something that serves the objectives of whatever intelligence operates the underground network. Dr. Angela Martinez, a materials scientist who specialized in analyzing the composition of particles produced in collision experiments, discovered that recent experiments had been generating isotopes that shouldn't exist according to known physics. These exotic particles remained stable far longer than theoretical models predicted, and they exhibited properties that suggested artificial enhancement rather than natural formation. What made Dr. Martinez's discoveries particularly unsettling was evidence that these artificial isotopes were being systematically collected and removed from the detection systems. Equipment that should have contained particle debris for analysis was consistently empty after experiments that produced the anomalous materials. The isotopes were being harvested by systems that operated outside the official experimental protocols. Dr. Martinez attempted to trace where these materials were being redirected, but her investigation revealed collection systems that weren't documented in any facility blueprints. Conduits that led to areas of CERN that didn't officially exist, connected to processing equipment that operated according to principles she couldn't identify. Her attempts to access these systems were blocked by security protocols that required clearance levels beyond anything she'd encountered in her decade at CERN. When Dr. Martinez submitted reports about her discoveries, she was informed that the anomalous isotopes represented measurement errors caused by equipment calibration issues. The collection systems she'd identified were described as routine maintenance infrastructure that didn't require documentation in research protocols. Her security clearance was modified to exclude access to the areas where she'd detected the unauthorized material harvesting operations. But Dr. Martinez had documented everything before submitting her official reports. Working from her personal laboratory equipment, she conducted independent analysis of particle samples she'd retained from experiments conducted before the collection systems began operating. The comparison revealed that the artificial isotopes weren't random byproducts of high-energy collisions. They were being created deliberately, with specific atomic structures that served unknown technological purposes. The isotopes showed properties that suggested they could serve as components in quantum computing systems far more advanced than anything in human technology. They exhibited superconductivity at temperatures that should have been impossible, maintained quantum coherence for periods that defied theoretical limits, and demonstrated electromagnetic properties that could enable communication systems operating on principles beyond current scientific understanding. Dr. Martinez's analysis indicated that CERN's particle accelerator had been converted into a manufacturing system for exotic materials required by the underground network. The scientific experiments that justified the facility's existence were being used as cover for industrial processes that produced components needed for technology that operated according to physics humanity hadn't discovered. The implications were staggering. If this material harvesting had been ongoing throughout CERN's operational history, then whatever lay beneath the facility had been accumulating technological components for decades. The underground network possessed manufacturing capabilities that could produce materials impossible to create with human technology, and it had been using one of humanity's most advanced scientific facilities to support its operations without anyone realizing what was happening. The specialized teams investigating the facility during the current shutdown have confirmed that the underground chambers contain equipment constructed from these exotic materials. Quantum processors that operate at computational speeds that exceed anything in human technology. Energy storage systems that maintain power levels far beyond the capacity of conventional batteries. And communication arrays that can transmit information across vast distances without using electromagnetic radiation that would be detectable by human monitoring systems. But the most disturbing discovery involves the ultimate purpose of this accumulated technology. Analysis of the underground systems reveals preparation for large-scale modifications to Earth's electromagnetic environment. Equipment designed to generate field effects that would alter the behavior of electronic systems across entire continents. Resonance generators capable of influencing seismic activity along major geological fault lines. And transmission arrays that could affect the operation of satellites, power grids, and communication networks on a global scale. The underground network hasn't been passively monitoring human activities. It's been preparing to intervene in human civilization in ways that would fundamentally alter the technological infrastructure that modern society depends upon. The timing of these preparations suggests that whatever event the network has been building toward is approaching rapidly. Intelligence analysts studying the data recovered from CERN's underground chambers have identified similar preparation activities at sites around the world. Ancient structures that house technology operating on the same principles as the systems beneath CERN. Research facilities where experiments have been producing results that contribute to the same global network. And geological sites where underground construction projects have been proceeding without any official authorization or human oversight. The pattern reveals a coordinated effort that spans continents and involves technological capabilities that exceed human understanding. The network appears to have been dormant for centuries or millennia, activated by specific conditions that include the development of human technology to levels that enable certain types of high-energy experiments. CERN's particle accelerator reached the energy levels required to trigger this activation sequence, inadvertently awakening systems that had been waiting for precisely these conditions to emerge. The shutdown of the Large Hadron Collider represents an attempt to interrupt this activation process before it reaches completion. But preliminary assessments suggest that the network may have already accumulated sufficient resources and energy to proceed with its objectives, regardless of whether CERN's experiments continue. The underground systems have achieved a level of independence that no longer requires external power sources or material inputs from human facilities. Dr. Patricia Kim, a systems analyst who participated in the initial assessment of the underground network, described technology that operates according to principles that challenge fundamental assumptions about physics, engineering, and information processing. Devices that seem to manipulate matter at the quantum level with precision that exceeds anything theoretically possible. Energy systems that draw power from sources that can't be identified using conventional detection methods, and control systems that demonstrate capabilities that suggest artificial intelligence far more advanced than anything in human development. The underground network possesses technology that could revolutionize human civilization or destroy it entirely, depending on the objectives of whatever intelligence controls these systems. The fact that this network has remained hidden while operating beneath one of humanity's most advanced scientific facilities suggests capabilities for concealment and misdirection that exceed anything in human experience. Current efforts to understand and potentially contain the underground network involve resources and expertise from intelligence agencies, military organizations, and scientific institutions across multiple countries. The scope of the operation reflects recognition that the situation at CERN represents a threat to global security that transcends conventional national boundaries or organizational jurisdictions. But the effectiveness of these containment efforts remains questionable, given the technological superiority demonstrated by the underground systems. Conventional security measures appear inadequate when dealing with technology that can modify physical structures, influence electronic systems, and operate according to principles that human science doesn't understand. The specialized teams investigating CERN's underground levels are essentially attempting to contain something that possesses capabilities equivalent to what might be expected from a significantly more advanced civilization. The questions that emerge from this situation extend far beyond the immediate concerns about CERN's underground network. If such advanced technology has been operating beneath human awareness for extended periods, what other installations might exist in locations around the world? How long has this network been influencing human technological development through subtle manipulations of research results and experimental data? And what are the ultimate objectives of whatever intelligence operates these systems? These questions have prompted investigations at research facilities, archaeological sites, and geological formations around the world where similar anomalies have been detected. The results of these investigations remain classified, but preliminary reports suggest that CERN's underground network is part of a much larger infrastructure that has been operating globally while remaining invisible to human awareness. The shutdown of the Large Hadron Collider may have interrupted one component of this network, but it's becoming increasingly clear that the situation extends far beyond what can be addressed by securing a single facility. Whatever lies beneath CERN appears to be preparing for changes that would affect human civilization on a planetary scale, and the timeline for these changes may be measured in months rather than years or decades. The first indication that something had gone catastrophically wrong came through channels that weren't supposed to exist. Dr. Rachel Hoffman, a quantum field theorist who'd maintained contact with colleagues still inside CERN, received an encrypted message in January 2025 that contained just 3 words: "They're coming up." The message originated from a terminal deep within CERN's restricted underground levels, transmitted through communication pathways that bypassed all official monitoring systems. The sender's identity remained encrypted beyond anything Dr. Hoffman could decode, but the timestamp indicated the message had been sent during the facility's supposed shutdown period when most personnel weren't authorized to access those areas. Dr. Hoffman had left CERN 6 months earlier after her research into quantum vacuum fluctuations began producing results that defied conventional physics. Her experiments had detected energy patterns that seemed to originate from sources far below the main accelerator tunnel. patterns that intensified whenever the underground monitoring systems registered activity in the sealed chamber network. Her departure had been voluntary, but the pressure to discontinue her research had made continuing at CERN impossible. Now, months later, that cryptic message suggested her worst fears were being realized. Whatever was emerging from the deep chambers beneath CERN was no longer content to remain hidden in the underground infrastructure. The decades of preparation, the accumulation of exotic materials, and the construction of advanced technology were culminating in something that would bring the hidden network into direct contact with the surface world. Within hours of receiving that message, Dr. Hoffman began detecting electromagnetic anomalies at her new research facility in California. Subtle field fluctuations that matched the patterns she'd observed during her final months at CERN. The anomalies weren't random background noise. They followed mathematical sequences that suggested structured communication between underground installations separated by thousands of miles. The global network was activating simultaneously across multiple continents. Sites in Australia, Japan, Chile, and Norway began registering similar electromagnetic signatures within days of each other. Archaeological locations that had shown no unusual activity for decades suddenly began emitting energy patterns that defied conventional explanation. Research facilities around the world reported equipment malfunctions that followed identical patterns despite operating completely different types of scientific instruments. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a geophysicist monitoring seismic activity near ancient stone circles in Scotland, recorded underground vibrations that synchronized perfectly with the electromagnetic anomalies Dr. Hoffman was detecting in California. The vibrations weren't caused by natural seismic events. They followed precise timing patterns that suggested coordinated activation of machinery operating far below the surface at multiple global locations. Similar reports began emerging from researchers at sites around the world. The Giza Plateau in Egypt showed underground activity that corresponded to electromagnetic pulses detected at Machu Picchu in Peru. Stone formations in China began resonating at frequencies that matched energy signatures recorded at ancient sites across Europe. The global network that had remained dormant for millennia was awakening according to a coordinated plan that spanned continents. Intelligence agencies that had been monitoring the situation at CERN quickly realized they were dealing with something far more extensive than a localized anomaly beneath a single research facility. Satellite imagery revealed construction activity at remote locations that had no official authorization. Ground-penetrating radar detected vast underground structures beneath sites that had been considered archaeologically insignificant. And electromagnetic monitoring systems registered communication traffic between installations that didn't appear on any official databases. The scope of the network challenged fundamental assumptions about human history and the development of advanced technology. Evidence suggested that sophisticated installations had been operating beneath the Earth's surface for periods that exceeded recorded human civilization. These installations had remained hidden through methods that demonstrated technological capabilities far beyond anything in human development, emerging only when specific conditions triggered their activation protocols. Dr. Amanda Foster, an archaeologist who'd spent her career studying ancient megalithic structures, received funding from undisclosed sources to investigate sites where unusual activity had been detected. Her preliminary surveys revealed construction techniques that couldn't be explained by conventional archaeological understanding. Stone blocks that showed precision cutting far beyond what should have been possible with ancient tools. Underground chambers that extended far deeper than surface structures would suggest. And most disturbing of all, evidence that these ancient sites had been modified recently using technology that left no traces detectable by conventional analysis methods. The modifications weren't random additions to existing archaeological sites. They showed systematic integration of advanced technology with ancient stone structures, creating hybrid installations that combined historical monuments with equipment that operated according to principles human science couldn't identify. The ancient sites had been converted into nodes in a global network that used humanity's most revered historical locations as camouflage for technological installations. Dr. Foster's investigations revealed that many of the world's most famous archaeological sites shared characteristics that had never been recognized by mainstream archaeology. Geometric alignments that corresponded to optimal electromagnetic transmission patterns, underground chamber systems that connected distant surface monuments through tunnels that showed no evidence of ancient construction techniques, and energy signatures that suggested these sites were drawing power from sources that couldn't be detected using conventional geological survey methods. The pattern extended across every continent and included archaeological sites from every major ancient civilization. Stonehenge, the pyramids of Giza, Angkor Wat, Easter Island, Chichen Itza, and dozens of other World Heritage sites showed evidence of technological integration that had been invisible to conventional archaeological analysis. The global network had been hiding in plain sight, using humanity's reverence for ancient monuments to protect installations that served purposes far beyond historical preservation. Meanwhile, the situation at CERN continued to evolve in ways that exceeded the containment capabilities of conventional security measures. Specialized teams attempting to investigate the underground network reported phenomena that challenged basic assumptions about the nature of physical reality. Equipment that functioned normally on the surface began malfunctioning when brought into the deep chambers. Electronic devices experienced systematic failures that suggested active interference rather than passive environmental effects. And personnel exposed to the underground installations for extended periods began reporting perceptual anomalies that persisted long after returning to surface levels. Dr. Thomas Reed, a military engineer with classified experience in unconventional warfare scenarios, led one of the teams investigating CERN's deepest levels. His preliminary reports described technology that operated according to principles that seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics. Devices that appeared to manipulate gravitational fields with precision that should have required energy inputs far exceeding anything available from terrestrial sources. Communication systems that transmitted information instantaneously across vast distances without using any detectable form of electromagnetic radiation. And construction materials that demonstrated properties suggesting they had been manufactured using atomic assembly techniques beyond human technological capabilities. Dr. Reed's team encountered chambers that seemed to extend infinitely downward, despite being constructed within geological formations that should have limited their depth. Mapping attempts using conventional surveying equipment produced results that contradicted basic principles of three-dimensional geometry. Underground passages that should have intersected based on surface measurements remained isolated from each other according to direct exploration. The underground network operated according to spatial relationships that defied conventional understanding of physical architecture. Most unsettling were the indications that the underground installations were actively aware of human presence and responded to investigative activities with countermeasures that demonstrated sophisticated strategic thinking. Security systems that adapted their defensive protocols based on the specific equipment and techniques being used by human investigators. Environmental modifications that created conditions designed to limit the effectiveness of human exploration efforts. And information warfare tactics that corrupted data recording systems in ways that prevented accurate documentation of discoveries. The underground intelligence possessing these installations demonstrated capabilities that suggested it had been studying human technology and psychology for extended periods. Its countermeasures showed detailed understanding of human limitations, fears, and decision-making patterns. The strategic responses were precisely calibrated to create maximum psychological pressure on human investigators while avoiding direct confrontation that might escalate the situation beyond manageable parameters. Dr. Reed's final report before his team was withdrawn from the underground levels described encounters with phenomena that exceeded his experience in dealing with advanced military technology. Holographic projections that seemed indistinguishable from physical reality until direct contact revealed their artificial nature. Acoustic effects that created voices speaking in languages that didn't match any known human linguistic patterns, and electromagnetic fields that seemed to influence cognitive processes in ways that made sustained rational analysis increasingly difficult. The psychological effects on personnel investigating the underground network became a significant concern for agencies coordinating the containment efforts. Extended exposure to the deep installations produced symptoms that resembled sensory deprivation, combined with information overload. Investigators reported difficulty maintaining focus on specific tasks, memory lapses regarding events that occurred during underground exploration, and persistent sensations that they were being observed by invisible presences. Medical evaluations of affected personnel revealed neurological changes that couldn't be explained by conventional exposure to electromagnetic fields or unusual atmospheric conditions. Brain scans showed activity patterns that suggested enhanced neural connectivity in some regions, while indicating suppressed function in others. The changes weren't random or pathological. They followed specific patterns that seemed designed to alter cognitive processing in ways that would make individuals more receptive to certain types of information, while reducing their ability to retain or communicate other types of data. These neurological modifications raised disturbing questions about the underground network's capabilities for influencing human consciousness. If brief exposure to the deep installations could produce measurable changes in brain function, what effects might result from prolonged contact with whatever intelligence operated these systems? Were the researchers who had left CERN experiencing similar modifications? And could these changes be reversed? Or were they permanent alterations that would continue affecting individuals long after their direct exposure ended? The answers to these questions remained classified, but personnel policies at facilities worldwide began incorporating screening procedures designed to identify individuals who might have been affected by exposure to anomalous underground installations. The screening protocols remained confidential, but they apparently focused on detecting cognitive changes that might indicate unauthorized contact with technology operating according to non-human principles. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a neuroscientist recruited to analyze the psychological effects of underground exposure, discovered that the cognitive modifications weren't entirely negative. Some personnel showed enhanced mathematical reasoning abilities, improved pattern recognition skills, and increased sensitivity to electromagnetic phenomena that might be useful for detecting concealed technology. The changes seemed designed to create individuals who could serve as intermediaries between human consciousness and whatever intelligence operated the underground network. These enhanced individuals reported experiences that suggested direct communication with the underground intelligence through methods that bypassed conventional sensory channels. Information appeared in their consciousness without passing through normal cognitive processing pathways. Complex technical concepts became intuitively understandable without requiring traditional learning processes. And most significantly, they began demonstrating knowledge about the underground network's objectives and timeline that hadn't been communicated through any conventional information channels. The intelligence operating the underground network was apparently recruiting human agents by modifying their cognitive capabilities to enable direct neural interface with its communication systems. These modified individuals retained their human personalities and loyalties, but they possessed access to information and capabilities that exceeded anything available through conventional human channels. They became bridges between human civilization and whatever lay beneath the surface. Dr. Walsh's analysis suggested that this recruitment process had been ongoing for decades, possibly centuries, operating through subtle exposure at archaeological sites, research facilities, and other locations where the underground network maintained concealed installations. Individuals who spent significant time at these locations might experience gradual cognitive modifications that enhanced their compatibility with non-human intelligence systems, while leaving them unaware that any changes had occurred. The implications were staggering. If this recruitment process had been operating throughout human history, then significant numbers of individuals in positions of scientific, political, and cultural influence might be serving as unconscious agents of the underground network. Their research decisions, directions, and policy recommendations might be influenced by information and objectives originating from non-human intelligence sources. This possibility prompted comprehensive security reviews at research institutions, government agencies, and cultural organizations worldwide. Personnel who had worked at locations where underground anomalies had been detected underwent detailed psychological evaluations designed to identify potential cognitive modifications. The results of these evaluations remained classified, but policy changes at major institutions suggested that concerning patterns had been identified among individuals with access to sensitive information and decision-making authority. The discovery of this recruitment network transformed the containment efforts from a localized security issue into a global counterintelligence operation. The underground network wasn't simply a technological threat that could be addressed through conventional military responses. It represented an intelligence operation that had been influencing human civilization for unknown periods through methods that remained largely invisible to conventional security awareness. Agencies coordinating the response to the underground network began developing countermeasures designed to identify and neutralize the influence of recruited agents while avoiding actions that might escalate the situation into direct conflict. The challenge was enormous. How do you counter an intelligence operation that operates through modified human agents who may not be aware of their recruitment? How do you distinguish between genuine human decision-making and choices influenced by non-human intelligence sources? And how do you develop security protocols when the threat possesses capabilities that exceed human understanding of information warfare and psychological manipulation? These questions became even more urgent as the global activation of the underground network accelerated throughout early 2025. Sites around the world showed increasing activity levels that suggested preparation for some kind of coordinated event. Electromagnetic signatures intensified according to mathematical progressions that implied exponential growth toward specific threshold values. Seismic monitoring detected underground construction activities that proceeded at rates far exceeding human technological capabilities, and modified personnel began reporting communications that suggested the completion of objectives network was approaching that had been decades in preparation. The timeline for whatever the underground network was preparing appeared to be measured in weeks rather than months. Energy accumulation rates at sites worldwide were building toward convergence points that mathematical analysis suggested would occur in the near future. Construction activities detected beneath archaeological sites showed similar acceleration patterns, and the recruitment of modified human agents had intensified dramatically, suggesting the network needed increased human cooperation for whatever final phase was approaching. Intelligence agencies found themselves preparing for scenarios that exceeded anything in their previous experience. How do you respond to a threat that possesses superior technology, operates according to unknown strategic principles, and may have been influencing human civilization for centuries through methods that remain largely invisible? How do you protect against an intelligence that has demonstrated the ability to modify human consciousness while maintaining installations that exceed human technological capabilities? The situation demanded resources and expertise from every available source, but the challenge remained daunting. The underground network had demonstrated technological superiority, strategic sophistication, and intimate knowledge of human limitations and vulnerabilities. Whatever objectives it was pursuing had been planned across timescales that exceeded human political and cultural cycles, implemented through methods that had remained undetected despite operating beneath humanity's most advanced scientific facilities. The shutdown of CERN's Large Hadron Collider had interrupted one component of the network's operations, but it was becoming increasingly clear that the situation extended far beyond what could be addressed by securing individual facilities. The global nature of the network, its technological capabilities, and its influence over modified human agents created challenges that would require unprecedented international cooperation and resources that might exceed what human civilization could deploy in the limited time that appeared to remain before whatever the network was building toward reached completion. So, here we are, staring into the abyss beneath one of humanity's greatest scientific achievements, and the abyss is staring back. What started as routine construction beneath the Swiss countryside has revealed something that challenges everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. Ancient technology operating alongside quantum computers. Archaeological sites converted into nodes in a global communication network, and human consciousness itself being modified to serve purposes we're only beginning to understand. The Large Hadron Collider remains silent in its underground tomb, officially shut down for maintenance. But we now know the truth. This isn't about energy costs or technical upgrades. This is about containing something that may have been waiting beneath our feet for longer than human civilization has existed. Something that's been learning from our most advanced experiments while preparing for objectives that could reshape the very foundations of our technological society. The question isn't whether we're alone in the universe anymore. The question is whether we ever were, and whether whatever's been sharing this planet with us is finally ready to make its presence known. The countdown has begun. The network is activating, and we're about to discover just how much of human history has been influenced by intelligence that operates from the depths beneath our most sacred and scientific sites. Keep watching, keep questioning, because the next few months may determine whether humanity remains in control of its own destiny or whether we discover we never were. The truth is down there, buried beneath layers of rock and secrecy. And it's coming up. And it's coming up.